West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
Hello, everyone, and a very good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever, to you all. My name is Chris Avis, and it's my pleasure to welcome those of you who have managed to come today, either in the hall or, of course, via Zoom from somewhere in the world. West Hill United is located in Treaty 20 and in the area of the Williams Treaties of 1923. These are the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations and were previously occupied by the Seneca and Huron-Wendat First Nations. Take a moment to look towards the two-row banner, which is displayed in our meeting hall. It was purposefully designed and chosen by our congregation because it's based on the two-row Wampum Treaty, which is a mutual treaty agreement made in 1613 between representatives of the Five Nations of the Haudenosaunee and representatives of the Dutch government in what is now upstate New York. It's one of the oldest treaty relationships between the Onwe-Honwe, the original people of Turtle Island in North America, and European immigrants. The treaty acknowledges the agreement that the two nations will live side by side in a relationship of peace, friendship, and respect, and non-interference for as long as the waters flow downhill, the grass grows green, and the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. At the end of our readings at West Hill, we customarily add the phrase offered as wisdom for the journey. And we invite the response, may we walk in its light. No obligations here, just a suggestion if you'd like to do that. Just one reading today, which comes from a book published in 1998 called Coming Back to Life, Practices to Reconnect Our Lives, Our World, written by Joanna Macy and Molly Young Brown. To allow ourselves to feel the pain of the world is to dare to reflect on what we love. Grief, anger, and fear rise because we care, because we are intimately connected to life. These emotions are not enemies to be exiled. They are invitations to awareness. By reflecting on them, not suppressing, not dramatizing, we access a wider view of ourselves and of the world, a new spaciousness of heart. From this depth of reflection, new possibilities emerge. offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we walk
May we walk in its light.
Hello again. As I started the beginning of our time together, we've been doing a series called What is Wisdom? And we've been looking at the different components of not just everything that's wise, but what are the ingredients if you want to live a wise life? We've looked at things such as empathy, or Dave gave a talk on learning and unlearning. We've talked about what to do with these emotions that we feel. How can we use them to learn from them? This week, we're talking about reflection. And as I reflected on reflection, reflection, I thought this might be the favorite talk that I give. And I mean, this is looking out, 2 months ago when I was looking at this series. And it's been something that I've been practicing for intentionally for about 20 years now. So this should be a really good talk, right? I've had 20 years to build up to this. It's something that has had a huge impact in my life. I'm excited to share. Before I kind of share a little bit of my personal story, I'm going to go to some quotes here. Oh, just looking for the clicker. It's in the pocket. There we go. You are probably familiar with this. The unexamined life is not worth living. Basically what Socrates is saying, if you want to live the best life that you can, the good life, consider how you're living. Reflect on it. Be intentional. This is Judith Gluck here, is a researcher at a university in Australia. And this is from an article with the University of Chicago. They have a Center of Practical Wisdom. And she writes an article and she says, and so we've been proposing, talking about the research that they've done in Australia, we've been proposing 5 resources that we assume to be the most central for the development of wisdom. They include A, reflectivity, B, openness, which we'll be talking about in a couple weeks, C, emotional regulation, we talked about the last 2 weeks, and empathy, and then, of course, a sense of mastery. And you might be like, a sense of mastery, what does that mean? Basically means learning to control what you can control and letting go of what you cannot. But once again, that first thing there, reflectivity, it's a pillar if we want to live wise lives. One more quote here. Confucius, by 3 methods we may learn wisdom. The first, by reflection, which is noblest. The second, by imitation, which is easiest, and third, by experience, which is the bitterest. I'm going to say this quote again, but I'm going to kind of say it backwards here. I'm going to start with the third thing. So, and by third, we can learn wisdom. By experience, which is the bitterest. Anybody ever experienced that before? Yeah, life can be a tough teacher sometimes, right? And the sad thing is, a lot of people, even though they have these experiences in life, they still don't gain wisdom from it. And so if we're fortunate, if we do it right, we can learn wisdom from life, but it's still the bitterest because you still had to go through. Now, some of the things you can't avoid, but some of the things, if we were wiser, we could avoid, of course. The second thing here, still working in reverse order, by imitation, which is easiest. And that's a good way. We want to be a certain way, and so we kind of, for example, we notice someone. We say, I want to be like them. And that is a really good way. I really mean that. There's so many people that we can look up to. But then Confucius turns it in to ourselves, reflection. Says it's the noblest. Here's some things that kind of stood out to me as I was reflecting on this idea. Why it might be the noblest is because we don't always have to look at others. We can know our specific situation, our context, and it can be easier whenever we have to make decisions. We know ourselves. Another big reason is we understand the why. If we keep looking at other people, that's good, and we might start to understand the why. But when we really get to know ourselves, we can have a better idea of why we do what we do. and how to make the most of that so that we can live the best, most loving lives that we can. So once again, the three methods we may learn wisdom. The first one by reflection, which is noblest. I want to share a little bit of my journey. When I was a young man, and you might be reading this already, sorry I have this slide up, but when I was a young man, as I've shared at different times, we all have these struggles, right? We all have these things in life that we go through. They say during our adolescent ages is when we really start to ask these big questions. Who am I? Do I belong? Where do I belong? How do I belong? How did I get here? Where do I go from here? What is my purpose? And for myself, the question of belonging was a huge question that I would ask myself. Now, I've shared before that I grew up living with a couple different families. And sometimes I was in a good situation, and sometimes, unfortunately, I would think this isn't maybe, the best. I went to 7 schools in 7 years. And as some, I felt like I really belonged, but sometimes you go to a new school and you're the new kid all over again. And you're already going through these questions that you have during these teenage years. And like I said, that question of belonging, who am I? Where do I belong? How do I belong? Should I try to be the athlete? Should I try to be the funny person? Is it music? Is that my thing? And you're questioning. Sometimes, like I said, you feel like that you do belong and you are part of kind of the groove of things. But sometimes I didn't. Now, a major event happened, and this is why I have this quote up here. When I was 19 years old, I came from a very religious background. And the tradition that I grew up in, Christianity, there's this main teaching. And I remember reading it, and it says this. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." I'll get to the second part here in a second. And that might just seem like this scripture from thousands of years ago. And I want to be careful as well. When I talk about this, I'm not making a claim of, we should follow this, or, if there's a God or not a God. I'm simply sharing from my experience in the tradition that I grew up in. And I came across this scripture. And in the Christian scriptures, it is said that this is the most central teaching. Jesus in the New Testament called it the greatest commandment. And then he said the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. You might be wondering, what does this have to do with reflection? I thought to myself, all those questions, those existential questions, I don't know all of those things, and that's okay. But I told myself as a 19-year-old young man, these situations, you might not always have control of them. But can you aim to love, and to love with all that you can, and then to love your neighbor as yourself? And at that time, I was in university and I was studying religion. And shortly after, I came across this scripture and it really resonated with me. I started taking Hebrew. That's not a fun language, in case you're wondering. I struggle reading like, the normal way, left to right. Well, they read backwards, right to left. So that was a fun time of my life. But as I began studying Hebrew, I quickly realized that this scripture came from Deuteronomy chapter 6, and it is central to the Jewish tradition, the Jewish faith. They call it the Shema, and Shema means hear. It's the first word, hear. It's saying, use your ears, be aware, listen, reflect, know what is good, know what is not. Be observant of how you are treating one another, if you're loving your neighbors yourself, if you're using empathy. And I remember reading through this, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart. And this is the part that really stuck out to me. With all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. It's supposed to be on your heart. And at that time in my life, as someone who is very religious, that part, to be on my heart, when I looked at the Hebrew, it's this word lab, or lab, L-A-B, and it means the center of your decision-making processes. It's not just feeling, I mean, that's part of it, but it's, if you love somebody with all of your heart, it's not just emotion. You're going to put your mind into it as well. You're going to make decisions that aim to love that person with all of your heart. And so this part here, with all of your heart, it caused me to reflect. Was I loving with all of my heart? And then I started reflecting all of your soul. And of course, there's this, different spiritual connotations. But another definition is the depths of who you are. What matters the most in your life? The deepest parts. And then this next word, strength, it's a Hebrew word meod, M-E-O-D, and it means effort. And once again, it goes back to this idea of what you're doing. It continues this teaching that's at the core of the Jewish tradition. It goes on, it says, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Reflect, 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 so that you can live the best life that you can. So that you can understand who you are, where you have been, and then where you need to go. So for me, as a young man, 19 years old, I reflected on my life. And this idea, once again, and the idea that I want to communicate today is that I chose to love. And I started looking at these things. Wow, when you sit at home, when you walk around along the road, when you lie down, when you get up, and I started practices. When I got up, I would have intentions for the day. How can I love with all that I can today? Including myself, including people. When at night, it says when you lie down, I started to think, at night, how did I love? What could I have done better? Where was I strong? Where was I weak at? And then I would start to look ahead at the next day as well. Other things, it says here, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. And a lot of people in the Jewish tradition will do such things. Now, for myself, I didn't, tie things to my hands and my foreheads. But every day for a couple of years, I would write on my left wrist, remember to love. I'd have different combinations of that. Remember to love, or to love with all that you can, or, love yourself, love other people, different combinations. And I would choose my left wrist as a reminder, is closer to my heart than my right wrist. To use my heart, the center of my decision-making processes, as it says in the Hebrew. Now, I realize that we do not have doctrines or creeds, and once again, that's not what I'm trying to say this morning, and I think that you get that. But what I'm saying is, when I was 19, I'm so happy that I chose to do these things. I didn't take classes in meditation or mindfulness or all those things, but I began to have different practices and to discover. And in fact, these scriptures here for me, it's what took me out of fundamental religion. For me, it was when I had to reflect and say, Joe, are you aiming to love with all that you can? Are you aiming to love your neighbor as yourself? Because if you are, can you be against people who are LGBT? If you're aiming to love people the best that you can, what about people who see things from a different perspective? Maybe you don't have all of the truth. And it helped me grow and to blossom, in my opinion, an overall decent person, obviously not perfect. And over the years, this long teaching kind of got boiled down to this statement right here. And this is what I choose to reflect on. Now, I realize I'm going on a little bit about my story here. So thank you for being a captive audience. I'm going to talk about this statement a little bit. It's been foundational to me, and then I'm going to open it up if anybody else would like to share about ways that you reflect. And as I talk about this statement, I'm going to talk about some of the different practices that I've utilized in my life, as well as I'm going to share what some of the research says as some of the best practices. And I'll go ahead and just kind of, throw out the spoiler here, is that the research, there are some methods of reflection that are better than others, such as journaling, meditation, mindfulness, and specifically with journaling, structured journaling. However, the research also shows it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so as you think about maybe the different reflective techniques that you have used, know that, just because, let's say, you don't journal, that's okay. There's other techniques. And, I've heard from different people. Some people like, music. I put out a post actually on social media this week asking how different people reflect. And a good friend of mine who's an incredible artist, he said, when I'm alone in my studio. I thought, wow, I could see that. And so different people have different ways of that they choose to reflect. And over the years, for about 20 years now, I have really explored so many different ways. Not saying I'm a expert in any of them, but the different ways have really spoken to me. So this statement that I've really boiled down to kind of be, through a process of 20 years of reflection, probably the most meaningful in my life, to love the best that you can. It's a simple thing. But I've realized, with all this reflection, this is what matters. And I was going to mention this earlier. We have about 6,000 thoughts every day. And actually, to go a little bit more in depth with that, we have about 6,000 thought transitions. We actually have estimated about 60 to 70,000 overall thoughts. So for example, I could look at this chair and say, oh, that's a nice chair. And that's one thought. It has 4 legs. That's another thought. But the thought transition would be, that's a chair. And then I look and I see something over here. I think about what's for lunch. And now I got you all thinking about lunch, so I'm sorry. 6,000. But of that 6,000 thought transitions that we have, they estimate that around 85% of it is negative. Why do I bring that up? Because not all reflection is good. You can have rumination. And that's where a lot of people dwell. So of those 6,000 thoughts, 5,000 being negative, a lot of that is spent in rumination. And I think what has really helped, for example, me reflecting on this little passage, this little mantra over my life, it's helped take me from that rumination into something, what we would call constructive reflection. Positive. It's not ignoring the bad. It's not saying, oh, everything is awesome. It's saying, yeah, this is here. Maybe you've heard of ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. It's accepting that life can just suck sometimes. It's also accepting the good. It's being honest. And that there's also a lot of good, and that's where beauty and art and all those things get their life from. But it's saying, okay, this is the situation. Now what will I commit to? I'll commit to love the best that I can. It's had huge impact on my life. So a little bit more in depth with it. Love. It's not like you just wave a magic wand. As I found out through years of reflection, I just can't say, oh, Joe, love the best you can, and I know what to do in every situation. So sometimes I will say something along the lines of, enjoy the best that you can. Maybe sometimes I can, sometimes get my thoughts and think too seriously, and I have to remind myself, another name for love is to enjoy. Enjoy the best that you can. Sometimes I'll say, kindness the best that you can. As I reflect at the beginning of the day, sometimes, maybe you'll come across somebody that's a little bit difficult. How can you meet them with kindness? Sometimes a name for love is kindness. Clicker doesn't want to be my friend. There we go. Sometimes it's justice, the best that you can. I could go on. There's so many different words here. There we go. Going back to this phrase, love the best that you can. Love, it's a relational word. And so I've had to consider, okay, well, what do I want to love towards? And a lot of times I'll input there myself, others, the world. And I can break that down even further, which I'll kind of do here in a little bit. I just want you to, I'm sorry I'm kind of going through all this, but I want you to kind of see where the reflection has taken me. So then I'll think about, okay, well, love the best that I can. Well, who am I? What is you? What is myself? I'll think about the different parts of my life. How am I loving in my relationships, like I kind of just mentioned? In my emotional part of my life, my mental, my intellectual, physical, environmental, occupational, resourceful, and so many different things. There's so many ways that you can slice it. And I'll say here really quick too, sometimes it's been journaling. Sometimes it's been structured journaling using prompts or different questions to kind of get at the heart of the matter. Sometimes it's been late at night, going for a walk and saying, Joe, what do you need? Looking at the different areas. There's another technique that I've used. It's called like a body scan, and you just kind of think about the different areas of yourself. My ears, how do I need to be aware and listen? My eyes, how do I need to see things? Do I have an honest, accurate take or a loving, kind, compassionate take? My mouth, what are the words that I need to tell myself or tell others? I could keep on going. My shoulders, and you kind of work your way down. What is the weight that I'm carrying? Do I want to carry that weight? Because sometimes I need to, because it's something that matters, but sometimes it might be unnecessary. I could keep going, but you get the idea. And then this last thing, resourceful, that's at the bottom here. There's a couple main resources that we have in life, but one of the biggest is time. Because I can say this and it sounds all good in theory, but I've realized through years of reflection, what am I doing with my time? And I can think about, okay, love the best that you can, Joe, with your life. Okay, that's good. Love the best that you can with your year, and I can, plan it. I can, have a planner and goals, and I can, use different, techniques, of course. But where I find where the juice is, where the life is, where the zest is where the rubber meets the road. When I can look at kind of the next 30 days and out. Once again, all the other things are good, but they're theoretical, and a lot of times people can say, someday, someday, someday. But reflection has taught me, and in fact, a form of reflection is mindfulness and meditation. And what does mindfulness and meditation do? It brings you to the moment. It takes away all the rumination that you can have going on, and it clears a space for what you need and what is good. The constructive reflection. And so when I get into kind of the nitty-gritty, who do I want to be today? Seize the day. How can I love the best I can today? And then sometimes, we've all had those things where we just don't feel like doing something that we know that we need to do. And I have to say, Joe, all you can control of this is this moment. And that, is a big teaching in Stoic philosophy. In this moment, sometimes, when I'm doing some writing or something, I don't want to write another sentence. That's the truth of the matter. But I know that I need to, that I really want to deep down. But in that moment, I don't feel like it sometimes, but I say, Joe, what do you need? What's the best way to love yourself? Okay, can you give it 5 minutes in this moment? All right, that is where 20 years of intentional reflecting has taken me. And thank you for hearing all this. I'm going to have on the screen some of the techniques that I have used over the years. And there are plenty more. And if you have one, here in a second, I would ask that you would share. Like I mentioned, journaling, structured according to the research, is the most effective. So, and there's different ways that you can structure it using prompts, using important questions. Expressive. So expressive is more of like free-form journaling where you just write, and sometimes you need to get it out there. And sometimes when you get it out there, you can have a greater awareness of what's going on. And you can name that feeling sometimes. And then when you name it, then you can start to tame it. Group reflection. This is what's so powerful about community. So the research shows that is a great way. Mind mapping. Anybody do mind mapping? I'm just curious. Yeah. And I want to be clear too. I don't do all of these things every day, all right? I would have no time for anything else. But mind mapping, sometimes in different seasons of my life or for different things, when I need to be more strategic, I found that mind mapping is helpful to me. I've done it. It's not as much my favorite, but I've heard really good things from others, and I have used it at times, but I haven't for a while. A life planning. So for example, there's like life planning journals and those such of things, and the value of them is a lot of times they can ask these deeper questions. It can be more of that structured format. Movement, walking, running, biking. And in fact, they say with walking, so the Stoics would say, a good walk, it's not guaranteed to really fix any of your life problems. However, pretty much anything that you're going through in life, a good walk isn't going to make it any worse. Do you get that? There's just something about, and they would actually say it's like a grounding technique, and grounding is when we kind of connect with ourself and reality, and when you walk, you literally, your feet are hitting the ground. There's just something to it, and especially when you can maybe be in nature. So music and art, meditation. I'm not the best at meditation. I try it at times. Mindfulness, just being aware, and you can practice mindfulness as you go through really just everything in life. And then I mentioned body scanning. There's so many different ways. I have said enough this morning. A couple weeks ago, I gave a talk that was 8 minutes and 18 seconds. So I figured I had a little bit more minutes that I could use this morning. So I'm going to close with this. The same quote we kind of started out with. By 3 methods we may learn wisdom. First, by reflection, which is noblest. Second, by imitation, which is easiest. And third, by experience, which is the bitterest. We're going to experience and live this life one way or another. So maybe it's better if we choose to reflect. And when you reflect, you can start to understand yourself and where you've been. And there's a word that is closely associated with reflection, and that is prospection. And once you reflect, you can know your values, the things that are at the depths of who you are and who you need to be, and then you can practice prospection in your life, and you can look forward and live a better, more loving, wise life. Question. I figure I'd keep it simple this morning. Sometimes we have a couple questions that we talk about as a group. How do you practice reflection? How has it helped you become a wiser, more loving person? I'll give you 30 seconds or so just to think about that. Consider it to yourself. And then if anybody would like to share online or here in the room, feel free to.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.